Today's guest is probably the most qualified gym rat we've had on the show. Joining me now, it's Caleb Heilman of Heilman's Performance. Obviously, you lead a very active lifestyle, but why did you want to make a gym your career?
So I think there were a number of factors that played into it. Growing up in a rural community, playing sports with my friends, my friend group, it's kind of all we did: football, baseball, basketball, and never really having an opportunity to experience strength and conditioning and physical training for sport. Mostly just because, we had a weight room in our high school that was really underutilized. Outside of the football coach having kind of a pre-made program for people to go in and use on their own, we just never really had anybody get us into the weight room and guide us through how to use it and how to do things properly. And then when I signed my letter of intent to play college baseball, it was just a part of our routine, so it was a mandatory part of our training. And then I got the opportunity to get into the weight room and experience it. And my first few experiences were pretty embarrassing. I was 18 and I had never set foot in a weight room before. So after my initial embarrassing experience with all of my college teammates, I got pretty motivated and decided that I wasn't going to let that happen anymore. Got kind of what I would call hyper-focused, I guess, on training. Fell in love with it. And then again, the ultimate solidifying factor was when I saw all of my work ethic in the weight room transferred to the baseball field, and I realized all the benefits that could be derived from training hard. So then I decided that, some of these athletes in rural communities that really don't have access to good strength and conditioning should have access to it. And then once I understood the benefits that could be derived from the weight room, I made it my mission, if you will, to try and teach these athletes the importance of getting in the weight room early and learning to navigate it and put it to use for them.
Obviously, you want to keep yourself fit and you want to help others do the same. At the same time, it's still a business for you. It's your livelihood. So what are some of the challenges to running a fitness business outside of, just taking care of the equipment if it busts, keeping it clean, and just telling people like, hey, come work out because it's a great thing to do for your health?
Yeah, I think kind of what you alluded to was that it is our livelihood. All of our coaches down here have degrees in the field. So with that comes student loan debt. A lot of them are in their 30s, so they're married and trying to start families and those kinds of things. So I think ensuring that we can pay them well and we can run a quality business is important to us, and with that comes financial constraints. So I think that's probably the biggest challenge, is trying to find a model that aligns itself with some of those altruistic reasons that we opened in the first place, and being able to service the community and make sure these athletes have what they need and being able to provide for them, but also ensuring that we can properly run our business from a financial standpoint, continue to grow, continue to pay our people well. And with that, we want to continue offering more services. So I think finding that balance between, that altruistic vision and also running a quality business.
You mentioned about your degreed staff that you have at Heilman's Performance. Kind of leads into one of the questions I wanted to ask you. You're certified in USA weightlifting programs, functional movement systems, National Strength and Conditioning Association. Of those processes, what was kind of the toughest one to earn or knowledge to maintain, and how has each one helped in your career?
I would say undoubtedly the Certified Strength and Conditioning Specialist certification that I hold through the National Strength and Conditioning Association was the most challenging to obtain. It's a relatively difficult certification exam to pass, two-part examination. The USA weightlifting certification that I've earned is kind of a weekend course. You take an exam at the end of the weekend. And then the functional movement systems cert is kind of the same thing. You go attend a weekend course, you read their manuals, learn more about it, and then you earn their certification. But I would say the CSCS is essentially the gold standard in strength and conditioning. So if you don't have your CSCS, you're kind of wasting your time even applying for jobs at universities and the like. So I would say of those three specifically, that was by far the most challenging.
As you're teaching people the proper fitness techniques, is there a one-size-fits-all type program that is most beneficial across the board, whether you're an athlete or just trying to be healthy, like just some baseline foundational stuff?
I wouldn't say that there's a one-size-fits-all program. I mean, we're all individuals, and we're going to see different things come about throughout the training process from everybody that we work with. I do think that depending on the population you're working with, you can work from a relatively generic template and make small tweaks and modifications depending on what we see in practice and try and optimize for the individual. Obviously as athletes get more specialized and they get older and they're really starting to get kind of those diminished returns from their training, that's when the real expertise comes in and you really got to learn how to be a sniper rather than just shooting shotguns in that sense. But I would say specifically to the population we work with most here in our community, the youth athletes at the high school and the youth athletes that come to our gym, you can get really, really good progress from most of them by teaching them simple movement competency and then teaching them how to get under load in these fundamental movements and then applying just the principle of progressive overload in those fundamental movements and making sure they're training safely for the long term.
How do you refine training to each sport and even more specifically someone's specific skill set? Because even like a center is different from a point guard, linebacker to a wide receiver, pitcher in baseball to an outfielder.
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's one that we encounter a lot. Again, for the community that we serve and the population we work with, most of the time sport specificity isn't necessary because in our community, as you know, most of the time the starting point guard is also the quarterback who is also the shortstop or center fielder. So for the most part, until these athletes are really starting to determine whether or not they want to play a specific sport at the next level, there's really no need for digging into the sport-specific interventions. So general athleticism, again, applying principles of progressive overload to developing strength and power and movement competency typically allows these athletes to then go express those physical qualities that we're helping them develop in whatever sport they want to excel in.
You might have answered a little bit of this already, but I was going to ask you, where is your stance on being a multi-sport athlete versus specializing in one?
Yeah, I actually did a podcast roughly a month ago, and we talked a lot about this. Again, I think it would be egregious to take a firm stance on either side to say that no specialization is ever necessary, but also to say that the only way to excel in a sport is to specialize. I think generally speaking, specialization is a bad idea, especially if it's done too early. We see increased rates of burnout, and you see increased injury risk because these athletes are engaging in the same activities that beat up on the same tissues at the same angles over long periods of time, and those tissues eventually just don't hold up. The Tommy John epidemic in youth baseball is a real example of that. But at the same time, there are some physical qualities and some sport-related qualities that if you don't learn at an early age and specifically engage in those activities consistently, you're not going to have an opportunity. And the example I used in my other podcast was skating. You can't just decide to play hockey at the age of 12 if you haven't been skating. So you'll just never keep up in the sport of hockey if you haven't been skating from age 2, 3, 4 consistently on up. I mean, it would be like trying to go play basketball and you've never learned how to run. So I do think there are some qualities that you need to learn early and consistently specialize in them if you want to excel in some sports.
For the high school athletes that you train and maybe some coach communication goes on, how do you kind of, I don't want to, maybe like gain the reputation as a place to go for high schoolers? And just when they're in the gym, I mean, how do your instructors kind of connect well with them?
Yeah, and it's definitely something that we're working on to be better at, getting connected to the high school coaches, trying to implement some of these tenets of the long-term athletic development model in the community. Again, I think it's challenging because of one of the things we talked about earlier was a lot of times we're viewed as a business, and sometimes you get viewed as, being monetarily driven. So I think being able to demonstrate that we are trying to align ourselves with that altruistic original vision helps a lot with that, with earning that trust and getting coaches to understand that, hey, we have a business to run, but at the same time, we're trying to do right by these young athletes and by the community. But that's something that's always waxing and waning, and it's a work in progress. And I think the approach we've taken is again, just try and do right by everybody, stay true to our original vision, and try and deliver first and foremost to the athletes. I think everybody would agree that if we're taking their growth and development and their health into account first, everybody will win in the end.
You're not only a teacher of sports and fitness, but you also competed. Minot State baseball, DLB Burlington Lakers. What were some of the best times for you at each stop?
Gosh, there's a lot of them. I was fortunate enough in the sport of baseball to play with some really good players. The guy that first comes to mind is Jeremy Horst, who was drafted out of high school by the Pirates organization, ended up making it into the big league level, playing for a little while with the Phillies and with the Reds. So just summer baseball and the traveling and the practices and those kinds of things with your friends are the things you remember the most. And then, essentially the same thing at the NAIA level, playing baseball. It's not even necessarily the competitions and the specific events that are sport related that you remember, but you remember the people and you remember the friends that you made. I've got almost all of my coaching ties down here, my employees at some time were affiliated with Minot State baseball. So it's those networks that you build and the time that you spend on and off the field with those guys and the friendships that you make over time.
Minot State has taken you on in the capacity of Director of Human Performance, and I was just kind of curious, even before you were named that title, what was it like helping Minot State players get better? Have things even really changed that much? I'm sure you've been close to the school since you played there anyway.
Yeah, I would say, my relationship with the school and my affiliation with the athletic department hasn't changed much. I always joke that I've always kind of been in the shadows, but I think I'm the longest tenured coach there, even though I just started this position in 2019.
Nice.
I was a bench coach for the baseball team the year after I graduated. The year after that was when I started taking full responsibilities of the strength and conditioning program. And again, just kind of right place, right time when the previous director of strength and conditioning retired or moved on, resigned his position. And it was an easy segue into the position. So the biggest difference now is that I have a relationship with all of the coaches in the athletic department. I'm responsible for the development of all of the athletes at the university. So trying to trying to ensure that 370 athletes get what they need as opposed to 50 baseball players has been the biggest difference.
So are you sort of like the official off-campus gym of Minot State? I mean, that must be pretty cool.
Yeah, so we have to keep that separate.
Okay.
So what we do is it's a truly contracted position. I go up and I use their facilities and use the tools that they have there at their disposal. We train all of their athletes on campus in their weight room, and we're responsible to make sure that they get the service they need on campus, and it's been a really good relationship thus far. I've enjoyed it a ton.
Within the scope of Heilman's performance, because again, separate, what has been maybe some of the biggest success stories that you've seen come out of the gym?
Oh, man. I mean, so we've only been open for 6 years, and we've expanded essentially thrice our size from when we started, which I'm really proud of. And again, that speaks to what we talked about earlier, is financially trying to ensure that we can continue to provide and offer more services. Our coaches, man, if you talk to our coaches from when they first started to where they are now and how much better they are at what they do, I'm really proud of that our coaches are really committed to being a part of what we're doing, but also continuing to educate themselves and continuing to improve. Our weight room is just much better managed now than it's ever been. And then I would say the success that Minot State baseball has had recently is probably one of the things I'm most proud of, because I always joke with the recruits when they come and visit us. I signed my letter of intent 2 years after the team had gone 0-42. So 2 years prior to me graduating, they did not win a game in baseball, which is really hard to do.
Right. When you're trying,
point,
yeah.
Absolutely. At some point, somebody should just lose a game for you.
Yeah.
We should be able to put somebody out on the bump that can just go win one. So to see them transition from that over my time there as a player, as a bench coach, as their strength and conditioning coach, to now, 2 years ago they got to dogpile on University of Mary's field because they won the conference title outright with the eventual national champion in the conference. I mean, to be able to say that is incredible, and the amount of growth that program has made has been something that I'm really proud to be a part of.
Yeah, I mean, as a former player, obviously you're going to be close with that program for basically forever. So anything besides Minot State baseball that comes to mind as well?
Yeah, and I think we're long enough tenured now as a company that we've seen some of our athletes that have really committed to us early be able to grow and go stretch themselves for unique opportunities. I think of Alex Shimke, who's been a really good athlete in the Minot community for a number of years, who started training with us when he was 12, is now competing out on the West Coast at a school named Lower Columbia. They're in an independent baseball league. It's a junior college league, but is well known for funneling athletes to the Division I level out there in the Pac-12. And so a kid like that, to be able to see him come in and commit and believe in the vision and understand what we're trying to do here, and then see his career come to fruition and really, really go challenge himself in a climate that, has to be very scary for an 18-year-old, is something I'm really proud of. And we're starting to see a lot more of our athletes now do that, where we have some athletes signing letters of intent to attend Minot State University and other Division II schools. We have a couple swimmers at the University of Mary. So I think that's the coolest thing, is to be able to see them start early, buy into the process, remain patient, and then at the end of their high school career really see things pay off. Some of these kids are going to get higher education paid for, so I think that's fantastic to see.
Looking at all of the spectrum of working out broadly, there seems to be a couple of big picture goals that most people fit into. It's either you want to lose a ton of weight, build muscle, or if you're an athlete, just making that extra step ahead, kind of like what you said about seeing the difference it made on the baseball field, even though you were a college athlete already. So from your perspective, what do you think is the most difficult or takes the most effort to do?
I would say losing weight, ironically, is for sure the biggest challenge, mostly because it's societal and it's behavioral. Especially in the country we live in, it's not as simple all the time as telling people, hey, do this and don't do that. There's so many hormonal fluctuations and so many behaviors that are attached to the way we act and respond to certain stimuli that it is really, really difficult to get people to adhere to what they need to adhere to in order to lose weight. I also think there's a lot of misinformation out there that doesn't allow people to get what they need to achieve that goal. But undoubtedly, it is being able to lose weight, especially if it's somebody who has spent a lot of time gaining the weight that they want to lose. I mean, you're talking about a lot of times with adults, 20 years of behavior that we're trying to overhaul. So I think that's probably the biggest challenge. And then a step down from that is probably going to be, like I said earlier, getting an athlete who has already achieved a lot to be able to achieve that extra 10% they need to maybe get to the next level.
That's another mentality type thing too, right? They've done so much already, but to not let them sit on the talent they have already.
Absolutely. And that's what I spoke to earlier was that's the greatest people in the field, most successful people in our field, use snipers, not shotguns. I think when they're young, you can throw a big net out and catch a lot of these things that you need to catch. Just getting a young athlete involved in the weight room early, you're going to see a ton of progress because they're basically detrained. The real experts are the ones that can take an athlete who's had a ton of success and has turned over a lot of stones already in their athletic development and still find a way to make that athlete better.
I'm not talking about running Heilman's performance here. I'm talking about your personal fitness and experience working out for your own health. Obviously, in great shape, man, college athlete. Have you ever experienced any kind of adversity when it comes to maintaining good health?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think it's a constant relationship that you have with yourself. And I think one of the biggest mistakes people make is that they think it has to be perfect all the time, and that's just never the case.
How did you learn that?
Trial and error. I mean, and I would say that I got relatively obsessed, like I said. I mean, I called it hyper-focused earlier. But there was a time in my life where I was going to the weight room once, twice a day, every day, 7 days a week. I mean, it was ultimately good for me, but there's definitely a way that you can do too much of it. And if you expect to build Rome in one session, that can be equally problematic. So I think now, developing a healthy relationship with our own nutritional strategies and our health and fitness strategies is so important. And that's why I think it's so important to get kids and young people engaged early so they can really start to understand, how those things wax and wane. I was just joking with one of our interns the other day that when I was in my first fall camp, we had a newborn at home. I was in the second year of my master's program, and I was literally getting training sessions in by asking some of my athletes to just leave their weights out, and I would try and get 15 minutes of lifting in before my next group of athletes would come in. So I think just trying to find healthy ways to make sure you're getting something when life is punching you in the face is important. And then also, when life settles down a little bit, being able to find ways to ramp it up and focus a little bit more on it, but ultimately getting people to find a healthy balance and understand that it's never going to be perfect, and it doesn't have to for you to be able to remain fit and stay healthy for the long term. Speaking of life punching you in the face, how has it been keeping connected with athletes and regimens during COVID-19? It's been a real challenge, and I've done a lot of these Zoom calls with all the other strength and conditioning professionals in the NSIC, and it's helped me to be less hard on myself, knowing that they're experiencing the same challenges. I think right away it was, hey, let's get some body weight programs out. Let's get some videos out. Let's make sure we're staying connected and making sure these athletes have what they need. But now starting to understand that everybody in the country isn't experiencing the same guidelines and the same progress that we are here in North Dakota. We've had to try and get a little bit more creative in how we stay connected with those athletes and making sure that they still have what they need, and really shifting our focus. Initially, it was, how do we make sure these athletes stay prepared for their sport, to now, how do we make sure these athletes are maintaining their mental health and staying connected to the community, and how do we get them involved with their teammates, and still feeling like they're a part of something bigger than themselves, because it's more than just physical preparation at this point. When normal life becomes normal life again, what do you see in the immediate future and bigger picture, maybe even years ahead for Heilman's performance? Where do you guys want to go? So that's a good question, and it's one that I've tried to avoid answering.
Sweet.
A lot of people do ask, where do you see yourself in 5 years, in 10 years? What is the long-term goal? And I think, the old cliche is process-driven, not outcome-driven. Again, I learned that at a young age in the weight room. That's what we try and teach people, is just buy into the process, train hard, focus on what you're doing in the moment, be present, and the outcomes will just kind of become what they become. So I think from a business perspective, that really kind of is the approach. We really have just focused on what we're doing on a day-to-day basis. Try and do it to the best of our ability, and we've just kind of trusted that then the opportunities will come. And so far, that's been kind of the track record that we've had, is these opportunities have presented themselves, and then it's all about, getting your people together and having a real conversation about whether or not everybody's on board with taking on the opportunity and pursuing it to the best of our ability. So as far as where I see us, would I love to be doing basketball skill sessions and in the weight room with NBA players all day, every day? Absolutely. But my focus right now is to just do the best job we possibly can, day after day after day, with the people we're working with. And if a better opportunity presents itself, we'll talk about it and determine whether or not we pursue it. And that's just kind of the approach we've taken to that. I mean, even in the here and now, Caleb, not every independent gym owner gets to have a relationship with a college like you do. So, I mean, that's awesome. Good for you, man. And I remember doing a story about our previous question about how things are going during COVID-19. We clipped a bunch of your videos for the news and put them up. And It was a beautiful day that day, actually. So I mentioned to you how I was probably going to get this story done, then head over to the golf course. And you were a little dismissive of it. You said, well, I got to stick with basketball. I got to work on my jump shots when the baby's taking a nap. And I got to stick with just moving, man. Why do you pick basketball over golf already? I think part of it is living in North Dakota, right? Basketball just is a Midwest thing. I mean, when you live in an area that 7 months out of the year you can't get outside and golf, you got to find something to do. When I first started at Minot State, there was a lot of downtime in between classes, and I actually still lived outside of town. So in between my classes, the dome floor was always just wide open. And I would put my headphones in, and I'd grab a basketball, and I would just go shoot around. And my goal was never to become a better basketball player. It was just to move and get a good sweat in and be healthy. And over time, I really started to develop more skills on the basketball court. And then I started to get interested in, well, what if I really focused on this? And I really started to try to get better at basketball. And that's where I started to try and develop a routine and learn more about skill acquisition and those kinds of things. But for me, it really is a mental health thing to be able to get my heart rate up and put my headphones in and listen to some hip-hop music and really just, I guess, disconnect from the world and sweat. And, basketball has been a calling for me in that sense, and for no other reason. And as a result, I've developed some more skills and gotten passionate about sharing some of those skills with some of the youth in the community. I play all summer long with a lot of the college guys and a lot of the other amateur basketball players in the community. So I've just kind of by default slithered my way into the basketball community, I guess.
You get up putting shots up in between classes, you said. Were you mindful? Did you pack some deodorant or body spray for the sake of your classmates going to the next class?
Yeah, so ironically, I'm very type A, and I would say my relationship with basketball quickly turned into something very similar to my relationship with the weight room, and that was eventually I started getting up and getting to the basketball court before anybody else. So I would go in at 5, 6 o'clock in the morning, and I would put my headphones in and run up and down, and then we would have a lot of our strength sessions in the morning. So then I would go straight to the weight room and lift weights, and that allowed me to take my shower and clean up before having a good class. The girls weren't, at least, deathly afraid of me because of my hygiene.
The girls and then the dudes just got it, I guess.
Yeah, and Minot State is a small enough campus that if you're an athlete, the other athletes know who you are, or at least know what team you're affiliated with. So when you roll into class with that fat guy sweatshirt on, and you're soaked, they understand. They get it.
And grass stains and dirt from the baseball guys, all that good stuff.
Yeah, it wasn't uncommon for me to show up in my baseball pants to my afternoon class because they knew I had to go straight to the field after.
Well, clearly I'm not going to be able to convince you, but I'll send you my tee times from time to time anyway, Caleb.
All right. Hey, part of the reason I don't attend is because I'm thinking about you more than I'm thinking about me. I would spoil your golf experience if I got out there with you. I'm horrendous.
By kicking my butt.
Yeah, right.
Oh, man, that'll be the day. Caleb Heilman, Heilman's Performance. Thanks a lot, man.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.